Welcome to the Control Your Cash podcast. I'm your host, Tim Urich, and it is our pleasure to have Travis Robbins from Robbins Rehabilitation West. Travis, welcome to the show. We are doing lovely. No, so Travis, tell us about a little bit about your journey. Tell us how you got interested in physical therapy, uh, and tell us about some of the struggles and the successes that you've had.
Yeah, I got more struggles than successes probably, which is good. I do coaching and consulting now for PTs, and I get to teach them all the stuff I did wrong so that they make sure they don't do that. But I have a very typical physical therapy story how we got it. If you talk to 10 physical therapists, 8 of them are going to say, I had some kind of injury in high school or college, and I went to a PT, and I thought that was pretty cool, and I could do that, for the rest of my life. I had some injuries in high school, and I went to PT, and it was actually the physical therapist that I saw went to my high school. And I said, "Where'd you go to college?" And he said, "Well, I went to Ithaca College." So I went and checked out that college, and I said, "This is good. If I can get in here, I'll go here." And kind of ended up following in his footsteps. And now it's cool now that we do a ton of that at work in that, like our aid program. So the kids that work our front desk, almost all of them have 4-year degrees. Are trying to get into PT school. And if you talk to 10 of them, 8 of them would say the same story that I said, and just trying to get experience in the field. So I just kind of thought it was great in terms of the medical side of stuff. So you get to spend time with your patients. I don't know if you've been to a doctor's appointment recently, but you probably don't have a relationship with your doctor. Whereas if you talk to somebody who went through physical therapy, they probably have some kind of relationship with their physical therapist. Like if you need someone that knows a guy, like, hey, do you know a guy for like HVAC or plumbing, or a guy that'll get a raccoon out of your house? Like, ask a physical therapist, because we have met everybody from every line of work there is, and we actually have a relationship with them because we spend on average somewhere around 16 hours of time with them during their course of care. So I did that, and got out of school, and I got a job in Boston. My fiance at the time, my now wife, and I always wanted to live in like a bigger city, so we tried that for a little bit. Our first job I ever got was in Boston, and we found out it's very difficult to live on a physical therapist salary in Boston. So we ended up moving to the Poconos, which I did not know was a place. I only moved there because my twin brother, who's also a physical therapist, was in New Jersey at the time, and he said, "Hey, you got to check out these cheap houses in the Poconos." And this was in 2002, I guess, yeah. And I was like, "All right, I'll check it out." And then I went up there and I drove through the Poconos. I stopped at a builder and I bought a house like on the way home to Boston. I said, I got to find this guy. He should run sales for me. I don't know how the heck he did it, but he sold me a house. And I was like, "Yep, let's just do this." So I often make decisions quickly. It doesn't always work out for me, but this one definitely worked out. So I was in the Poconos, and then I was trying to find a job. I was going to work for the place my brother worked in New Jersey. It was a small private practice, similar to what I have now. And then that didn't work out. So I opened up the newspaper. This will date me, right? So I told this story the other day. It was hilarious. He's like, "Wait a second. You found a job in the newspaper?" Like, I didn't even know that existed. So I opened up the newspaper and looked for a job, and I found a job in the newspaper in Allentown, Pennsylvania, which I had never been to. And I went and interviewed there. It's for NovaCare, it's a large corporate PT place. And I worked there for a little while. I looked for a smaller private practice in our area. I just couldn't find one. So I was, at the time, I was 24. I was like, well, I don't have a huge mortgage. I don't have any kids. I can eat bologna sandwiches. Why don't I just try this private practice thing? Because I always kind of wanted my own practice. And the one piece of advice I could give people is, like, if you're going to open up your own business, do it early. Like, do it when you're young. Because once you get older and you have like these financial burdens of mortgages and kids and stuff like that, it's just kind of harder to get away from that. So open up the practice. That was almost 23 years ago now, and I'm still doing it.
Wow, that's amazing. So, uh, tell us about some of the struggles that you had starting your own business. What were some of the challenges?
Yeah, this will give you an idea of how much I knew about running a business. I still remember my first patient that I ever saw. I rented, so I worked at that NovaCare location. I found there's a doctor that had some hours there, and he says, "Hey, there's this chiropractor in town that's looking to have physical therapy in his practice. You should talk to him." I said, "Oh, great." So I went and talked to him. He says, "Yeah, you can. I'll give you this like 200 square feet in the back of my chiropractic office, and you can just do physical therapy there. and we have staff here, like admin that's here already, so they can like answer the phones for you and stuff. And you can try that. I said, yeah, sure. And that's kind of how I started. I rented 200 square feet in the back of a chiropractor's office, which is also a very common story that you'll hear from physical therapists who start their own practice. So I remember my first patient, I went into the waiting room and I said, hi, I'm Travis. I'm going to be your physical therapist today. And she said, great. Do you take my insurance? And I had no idea what that even meant. Like, I went to my first day of work and didn't realize that I had to have contracts with the insurance company in order to see their subscribers. So I was like, I looked at my front desk who had done billing and collections for chiropractic offices, which is very similar for physical therapy. And I was like, do we take her insurance? And she's like, I don't know. You never gave me any of your provider numbers. And I said, what's a provider number? So I didn't make a dime for the first 6 months because I was, for some of the insurances, I was able to backdate it and say, hey, I would love to be a subscriber, or I would love to be a provider for Blue Cross Blue Shield. And it's way different 23 years ago than it is now. Now that would not fly for sure. But I talked to some people on the phone. They said, yep, you can, we'll backdate it and we'll pay you. Some of them paid, some of them didn't. But that process was 6 months where I didn't get paid a dime from the insurance company. So I would work at the hospital on the weekends. I would pick up shifts at other places just to like make some kind of money before that money kind of came in. But to go back to the question you asked 20 minutes ago, what were the struggles? I mean, any PT that opens up a private practice, it's a little bit different now because the information is a little bit more available, but we don't know what we're doing. Like, we like to treat patients. We're good working with people, but the like billing and collections, the negotiation of contracts with the insurance company, we don't know how to do that. And that's usually kind of where we get taken advantage of. We just kind of take what we can get. But that initial one of just not knowing how to run a business, but not even knowing how physical therapy works with insurance companies was a huge struggle.
Yeah, and I would imagine like sales and marketing were probably was something else that you had no experience with, right? With a degree in physical therapy, I mean, they don't teach you how to market yourself.
No, I mean, the only thing, I mean, I had worked in physical therapy clinics before, so I would see patients come in and I would say, oh, how did you end up here? Well, my doctor sent me. Okay, well, there must be some kind of relationship with the doctor in this PT office. So I knew to go out to doctors. So I actually just did this a couple weeks ago. The first doctor I ever called on 23 years ago is a podiatrist. I don't remember how I got his. I think I used to get some patients from him at my old NovaCare office. That's how it was. And his name's Brad, and he's still a podiatrist and still in the same location he was 23 years ago. And we were just talking. He asked me how the kids were doing, and his kids are growing up same age as mine, and we were just kind of blown away with like how quickly 23 years went. So the initially marketing back then was you went out and talked to physicians. At that time, physicians were kind of privately owned. There were lots of them that were privately owned. And that now in 23 years, there's almost none that are privately owned. The hospital has kind of eaten all that business up. That's not unique to my location either. That's pretty much across the board. It's rare you find physical therapy clinics that rely heavily on doctor referrals anymore because the doctors that we used to work with, they love to say, hey, I would love to send you, Travis, but I'm at the hospital now. Like, they will get in trouble if you send out of the network. I remember a doctor said, just write a script and they can go wherever they want. He said, I'm telling you, it doesn't matter if I put why the patient wanted to go to Robbins Rehab, and it says patient preference, I'm going to get a call from administration after lunch. You can sit here and wait for me. Like, it will happen every single time. So I can't even put that on there anymore. So that's a whole nother issue. But the marketing has changed. It's changed more to like direct response marketing. So we go to the general public. First, we have to educate them on you don't need a prescription for physical therapy, which is kind of a big hurdle because they just kind of assume, I really use some physical therapy, but I got to go to my doctor. It takes 6 weeks to get into my doctor. You know what? I hope it just goes away. And maybe I don't need to do that. But they don't even know you can come. Like, if you called my office today and said I need PT, we would get you in today. We don't need a prescription from the doctor. So the marketing has changed in terms of how we used to do it. Now, before, we would do that in like a newspaper. Like, we would run a lot of newspaper ads. And still in some markets, newspaper ads do work because my demographic, typically, 55 and older, still reads the newspaper if they exist in your community. So, but a lot of it now has gone to digital marketing. So I don't know. I mean, I know basic metrics and numbers like that, but I don't know how to create a Facebook ad or an Instagram ad. We lean on other experts to do that in our industry. Yep. So we have six main buckets that we pull from in our practice. So, I mean, the good thing now is that I have been around for 23 years. So we want at least 65% of our new patients that are coming in have either come to us before or were referred by someone who came to us before. So that when you're starting out brand new, and that's what we were talking about before we got on the call, starting out in a brand new area. So we have 7 locations. We tend to add on in areas that are close to where we already are because we still have a foothold on that area because we have some people. The first thing we'll do is a zip code search, like, all right, how many of our past patients come from these zip codes? Like, okay, we can reach out to them. If they need physical therapy, they'll come back because they already know, like, and trust us. They've come to us for P2, we fixed their problem before. Now you have to be good at physical therapy. You can't have crappy physical therapies. People aren't going to come back. But in people that have been around as long as we have, we want a majority of our patients coming from those 2 buckets. That doesn't mean it automatically comes. You still have to do some marketing to them through email, newsletter. We're doing a new thing now where we have a magazine that we're sending out to our patients that have come to us for 2 or more plans of care. So if you come to us once, there's a good chance that you're going to come back. Might not be immediate, but if you come to us 2 or 3, sometimes more than that, you're probably a pretty big fan of us. So we market to that group of people differently. So past patient, friends and family, physician referrals. We do get physician referrals. Some of them will send out of the network, even though the network doesn't like it. There are some private physicians that are left that are kind of holding on. So we do have some of that. And workers' compensation, we see a small percentage of that. We would love to see more of that population, but that's a very political bucket to pull from. You've got to kind of, it's all who you know and relationships and contracts like that. And then general public. So general public is anybody that has no idea who we are and they saw a cold ad for us and said, yeah, I would like to try physical therapy with you guys to try to see if you can help me with my problems.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, it seems like obviously over the past 23 years, everything evolves and it changes a lot faster than it used to, right? So it's a kind of thing where you have to evolve and change almost just to keep up. And if you're really good at it, you could be on the forefront. And I know there's some things that you've been involved with, like the NLPT. If you could talk a little bit about how that was developed, the NLPT, and what insights you've garnered or learned from that.
Yeah, so that was in 2017. I had met some other private practice owners. Private practice owners are really generally not that great at networking. Like the first private practice owner that I met other than myself was at least 10 years after I opened up. Like you would think we would try to kind of get together and try to fix problems together, but there is kind of a competitive nature to that too. It's like, well, I have a place that's 2 miles from you, and I have another place that's 8 miles from another person. Like if we get together and help each other out, I don't know, that might be like a competitive disadvantage, but I was completely wrong on that. Like the more stuff you share and the more you help people, the more it comes back to you. So I started a mastermind in 2017 with other private practice owners from all over the US. We had met online at that time. Facebook and Facebook groups and that kind of stuff was really big. So you could meet other private practice owners from all over the country. I wish I could go back to 2023 and then shown what would happen in like 2017. Like that Facebook wasn't a thing, social media wasn't a thing. Like that's how I kind of created this company. I met these guys, and my wife would always call them, oh, those are your internet friends, right? So those these practice owners from all over, from Tennessee, Texas, Illinois, Indiana, and we got together and we did like a Zoom call like this. And that was around the time when Zoom was really getting popular too, to where you could do calls like this and help each other out. So we did virtual calls, and then eventually we did a live in-person event in Chattanooga. We just rented an Airbnb right around the time when Airbnb was getting popular. And we just got together, we threw our numbers up on the board, and it was like the metrics that we looked at to try to find out, okay, what are things that someone is doing right and things that people need help on. And it was crazy how it was 8 of us. We throw our numbers up, and we would look at statistics and ask some questions and say, wow, you're doing this really well, and I don't even look at that, or I don't do that really well. And here's where you're struggling. But guess what? Arlen does that really well. And he speaks on how you can help that out. And it accelerated our learning curve like so fast. So when we met in 2017, in about everybody at least double the size of their practice in like 18 months, which was crazy because all of us had been
Wow.
doing it for a very long time. I mean, we had one guy that was he's our elder statesman. He's been in private practice for over 30 years. So he has seen a lot of different stuff. So the point of that is if you want to accelerate your learning, you want to try to find somebody that is already where you want to get to and just kind of cheat off their paper. And guess what? When you get somewhere, you just want to try to give that back to somebody. So after we double the size of our practices pretty quickly, we're like, you know what? This seems to be helpful. Like it was helpful for us. Can we help other private practice owners? So we started to like, okay, we put together a Facebook group and then we did some coaching and consulting, everything from Zoom calls, like one-on-one coaching calls. We do live events. So we rent out houses in Orlando and private practice owners come down for like 2 days and we have like workshop and get to work across the table with them to try to find out what's going on with their practice. We do in-person coaching. Like I've flown to other practices and done like a drop-in coaching. Like I watched their practice for 2 days and kind of that's really like one of the most intimate levels of it where I can actually see what's going on in your floor. And that has been something that has been super helpful. So that's what we've been doing since 2017, just trying to help other private practice owners. We'll never say that we know everything, but between the 8 of us, it's like there's probably nothing problem you have run into that at least one of us hasn't already gone through, and then we just tell you what to do. So that's not just for physical, that's any industry. If you can find somebody that has already gone through like what you're going through, it's just the learning curve is accelerated.
That's amazing. So, Travis, I've always told my kids, and I share this a lot with my clients, there's no such thing as a wasted experience. And could you sort of share some insights that you received when you were working with somebody you were coaching, and it's like, you picked up a lesson that you're teaching them something, but you also picked up something from them.
Oh yeah, my coaching clients, I always tell them it's a shame you're paying me because like a lot of times I learn more from you than you learn from me. No matter who you are or what you're doing, whatever industry you're in, we'll stick in physical therapy. But if you went into any physical therapy clinic, there's something that they're doing that they usually don't even notice that is like in the top 3% of any private practice that you would go into. And they just kind of don't realize that. So in terms of specifics, it can just be specific metrics that we track. So it can be like initial evaluation arrival rate. So last year we looked at initial evaluation arrival rate. So I'll try not to get too into the weeds for people that aren't physical therapists that are looking into this. But every new patient that comes in, that sets up a new plan of care, they hurt their ankle, back, whatever, and they set up an appointment. We looked at what is the arrival rate of that patient. So in previous years, it would always hover around 90%. And what we assumed was, well, okay, if 10 patients scheduled, 9 of them came, that one patient, well, they canceled and they probably just rescheduled to the following week, or they were on vacation, or a kid got sick, so they're definitely rescheduling. Well, we went back and looked at it, and this was last year, and we found out that that wasn't happening. They canceled, but then we didn't have any systems in place to kind of follow up with them and try to make sure, okay, yeah, you were sick, but we want to make sure you get scheduled back in. We looked at it. We're never going to get 100%, right? So some people cancel an appointment. Maybe they were hospitalized. Maybe they found a place that was closer to their house and they wanted to go there. Or their cousin said, oh, you should go to my physical therapist. Don't go there. Cancel that appointment. We looked at, we don't have a very super large practice, but if we could turn that number from 90% to 94, so not a huge jump, just like some other systems, we ran the numbers, and how much money do you think that cost us in 2023? How much money did we lose by not getting that number from 90% to 94%? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, Tim.
Yeah, I'm going to say it might have cost you 10%.
Yeah, it was $250,000. So $250,000 that could have been in our bank account. Not to get to 100%. That's not realistic. That's just not going to happen. But to move it from 90 to 94. And I got that from a client. I was like looking at the numbers, like, what is this? Oh, yeah, we keep track of our initial evaluation arrival rate. Like, we're really big on that. I was like, is that really important? And when it comes to metrics, there's people that love to like dig into it. And like Arlen and Kevin have like so much numbers on their wall. It looks like, the New York Stock Exchange. That's great for some people. Some people just need a more condensed version of it. For me, when I coach, I'm like, we want to have the most important ones. So if I could get your most important metrics down to like 10 that you look at, which would be difficult, that's better than having 100. Sometimes with me and my brain, I just get overwhelmed by too many numbers. So that was a statistic I just wasn't looking at because I didn't think there was any value in it until I went back and actually ran the numbers at our annual offsite meeting where we take our leadership team and we go to typically the Poconos for like 3 days and we're like, okay, what are we going to work on and try to improve this year in our practice? And we looked at that number and we improved that to 94% this year, which was exciting.
Wow. Well, good for you. That's a milestone for sure. When you think about, the riches are in the niches, they say, right? So just these little details that if you follow and and track and work on improving could add significant value on an overall basis to your business.
Yeah, and physical therapy, typically physical therapists are very like subjective when it comes to the business side of stuff, which is kind of funny because whenever you go into physical therapy, there's two main sections of an initial evaluation, a daily visit. Whenever you go to a physical therapist, there's going to be a subjective version of what went on. So you're going to ask the patient, how are you feeling today? That's hard to quantify, It's like I'm feeling better than before. I'm feeling at like 96.5% of what I should be. Like it's very hard to do. There's a subjective version and then there's an objective version. The objective version is range of motion, muscle strength testing, special tests. So it's things that we have to put together to kind of present a case to the insurance company. This person needs physical therapy. Objectively,
Right.
something I can measure that is standardized, that's an issue that's going on. And that's in the theory is creating their subjective complaints. If we can fix the objective things that are going on, their subjective complaints, which is the reason they're coming in. No one comes into physical therapy and says, I don't have any pain or anything. I was just looking to improve my range of motion. Like nobody does that. So it has to be kind of this system where we kind of have to defend to the insurance company, hey, you should pay for this because we feel like they need it. It's the same thing on the business side. There's a very subjective side of business. I remember in evaluating physical therapists, I'll give you a quick story. It was we had our Allentown location has always been, it was the first location we had, so it's always been our biggest and most productive, most profitable. There's a lot of different reasons for that, but there was a time where all of our numbers dipped. This was way before 2017 when I met these guys and they taught me everything I know. We had a new PTA that started. I said, maybe it had something to do with that PTA, so new clinician. And so I talked to the patients that were seeing the clinician and I said, hey, how's this, I'm not going to say his name, but how's this new clinician doing? And I didn't hear anything. Oh my God, he's terrible. It's awful. They were just kind of like, yeah, he's a nice guy and he's pretty good. I didn't hear anything like subjectively from my patients that are there. So I was like, okay, it's probably not him. I didn't have any objective measures to try to find out like, is this a good PT or not? So that is the systems that we have in place now. The number one metric that we look at is successful graduation. So successful graduation is if you come to me for an initial evaluation for a plan of care, you hurt your back, we set up your goals at the beginning of the treatment. And we're like, okay, these are your goals. Typical goals for that would be, hey, I've got to return to work and I've got to be on my feet for 10-hour shifts 5 times a week. Okay, that is a very objective thing. I got to be able to do that without any pain. Great, that's one goal. What would you like to do outside of work? Okay, well, I used to hike, and I really don't do that anymore because of my back pain. Okay, what did you like to hike? I don't know. I would hike like 2 or 3 miles. How many times do you do that a week? 3 times a week. So if you could hike 3 miles 3 times a week, you'd be happy. Oh my God, that would be amazing. That's what you want to hear from a patient when you set up the goals. So they start a plan of care. They go through however many visits it takes to hit their goals. They hit their goals, and there's agreement on both sides of the table. Physical therapy really helped me out. What do you think the national average is in outpatient physical therapy? The graduation rate. They call it discharge rate. I don't like the word discharge. That's another podcast probably. But it's you came here to me with a problem. We fixed it, and you can do the things that you want to do now that you couldn't do before that. What do you think the national average is? All outpatient PT. Small private practices like mine, large corporate PT like NovaCare, large hospital PT. What is the percentage, essentially the success percentage of physical therapy?
I'm going to guess low, like probably 60%.
Yeah, so 11%. So
What?
11%, so it's 11%. That's my industry's success rate. So we use this a ton in training with our students that could come through. We probably rotate somewhere between 15 and 20 PT students through our locations. All of our clinicians obviously get this training, but you have entered an industry that has a 11% success rate. If you went to your mechanic today and your car wasn't working, you got to get to work. And he said, yeah, something wrong with my car. And the mechanic says, yeah, I got about an 11% chance of fixing this. That would be unacceptable. Like, I can't go without my car. This is your body. I mean, if your car completely craps out, you can just go get a new car. You cannot get a whole new body if something
Right.
doesn't work out. So we average above 85%. We shoot for 80. We have one clinic that's at 92% this year. That's going to be our record. But that is the objective measure of, okay, how good of a physical therapy practice are you? How good of a clinician are you? I would argue, and I've not heard any great arguments against it, your job as a physical therapist is to fix the problems that the patient came in for and to help them achieve their goals, whatever their goals are, and we try to set those really high. That's the goal. And if you just work backwards from there, there's tons of other metrics I could tell you about, but that's the most important one. It is hard to have a high successful graduation rate and have really poor metrics behind that.
Yeah, well, I mean that would just make that just makes so much sense when you think about it.
Yeah. So that one clinic, my clinic's like tanking. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? It was that clinician. Like we went back and looked at the numbers and the graduation rate, the arrival rate, the visit frequency, a million other numbers that we can look at were low. And that's why people were falling off their plans of care. Their length of stay was not what it should be. As soon as we parted ways with that clinician, all the other numbers went up. And that was an
Wow.
objective thing. It wasn't a subject, like he's a nice guy. If I saw him on the street today, I would ask him how he's doing and how his family's doing. But in the metrics that we look at, he was not performing where he needed to be, and it was crushing that clinic. It was the first time the clinic was even ever close to losing money. And we're like, man, I got to figure this out. So I would
Right.
say that like the big thing that is usually missing from the practices that we work with is some kind of measurement of success and then accountability behind that. So it can't be, the thing you'll always hear me say is we're not looking to blame, we're looking to solve. So if I had this experience all over again with all the information and knowledge I have now, the first thing I would do is, hey, we got to have a meeting here. These numbers are not where we need to be. So what are we not doing to support you? Because everybody else is doing well. So I always, as the leader, you always have to look back at yourself. Okay, what happened with training and onboarding? Did we like fast track that? Did you not get, everything that you needed in order to be successful in this position? And most people, when I first started, and this will relate to a lot of people that are listening to this, if you have a problem in your business, you always think it's a person problem. Like, I hired the wrong person. Like, this person is not understanding it. This person is not doing what we need to get done. And the longer I do this, the more I find out it's not a people problem. It's a systems problem. So if you don't have the systems in place to set people up for success, you're going to be constantly like rehiring people because you're like, this person just doesn't
Yeah.
get it. If you can't get a way to translate how you do things and how things are done in your organization, no matter what company you're in, to people that are coming on, which is typically through your hiring processes and your onboarding processes, you're going to be thinking you have people problems when really it's a system problem.
Well, that's interesting. So, Travis, I know we've talked a lot about your business and your journey. Let's talk about the times that you might have, our show is called the Control Your Cash podcast. And let's talk about the times where cash flow may not have been as good as you wanted it to be. And tell us about the struggles that you might have gone through.
Yeah, I think it certainly is. Medical practitioners, we tend to avoid the finance end of stuff. Like that was the last thing I learned. Like even when I learned like some of the business stuff that we talked about, it was great. I still didn't keep a good eye on finances. I think we have an aversion to it. There's some weird thing about, physical therapists, they feel bad about making money or something like that. But at the point, the thing I remember now is there was one point, again, way before I met these guys in 2017, that we were $350,000 in debt. And we were like, we would go back to the bank and say, hey, you need a little extra money for payroll. And eventually the bank said, we're not giving you any more money. And I couldn't agree with that more. Like I wouldn't give me more money either. So I had to go in to work on Monday and I had to lay off a clinician. This was a mother of four, the sole breadwinner of her family. And I said, I can't afford to pay you anymore. And it was at that point, it was like, man, I got to figure this stuff out. Like if I just keep like putting it off and going back to the bank and getting a more line of credit, Like the numbers are not looking like this is going to work out. So that's when I kind of focused on, most practitioners will be like, well, I just need to be a good clinician and everything's going to work out. There are plenty of good clinicians that don't have practices anymore because they didn't figure out the business stuff. So I didn't want to be that. So I kind of, instead of learning, going back and kind of doubling down on being a better clinician, I'm like, well, I got to be a better business owner or else I'm not going to be able to help anybody, right? So when you start as an outpatient PT, it's like, well, I can help as many people as my two hands can help. And then at some point, if I'm going to help more people, if people that are coming here think that we would be better off if there were more Robbins Rehabilitations in town, that it can't be just me. There's only so many hours that I can actually treat patients. So then you have to hire somebody. And then that is like when you have control of everything, then it's in some ways easier because you're always afraid that someone's going to screw up and do something wrong because they didn't do it the way that you did it. Like when the phone wouldn't get answered right, I would jump across the table and say, hey, oh, sorry about that. Okay. And then I would handle that customer service situation instead of letting someone struggle through it and then train them on the back end of it. So that to me, like when we were, that was crazy that we even got out of that much debt without having to do something really nasty. But we did. We kind of learned some more business techniques. We looked at our finances a little bit more, got some coaching and outside help in order to do that. And we got out of that hole. And then we started to be able to like breathe again and then find out like, yeah, you should have cash on hand. If you don't have any cash, then your options when things go badly are low. So you don't want to be in that position.
You know, that's such a great point because this is sort of where we come in, where, so just looking at your situation that you just described, unknowingly, we rely on banks and credit companies for access to capital. And that's exactly what you were doing because you didn't have a pool of capital, your own money that you could draw from. So what did you do? The easiest thing or the most logical thing was to be able to access the bank's capital. Well, if you do that, it's sort of like you get dependent on that process. And, you know, there's an old saying that a banker is somebody that will sell you an umbrella when it's sunny and take it back when it starts to rain.
All the talks I've heard you do, you've never said that? That's like one of your best ones, man.
But think about it. They get you hooked on this crack, if you will, this financial crack, and you keep going back and keep going back and keep going back, and then finally you say, hey, no more. Now what do you do? And that's usually they hit you at probably your worst point, at the worst possible time. And the importance of creating your own pool of capital so that when an emergency happens, you could draw on your own funds, or most frustrating of all, when you need access to capital to take advantage of an opportunity and you're sort of cut off from that opportunity, that's really frustrating because a lot of times we see opportunities as things that, you know, might come by once in a lifetime or twice in a lifetime. The reality is opportunities are going by us on a daily basis. The problem is sometimes we're so ingrained or so involved in the struggle that we don't have the time or the resources to even recognize or see these opportunities. And another saying that I heard not too long ago was, opportunities are never lost. They're just taken by other people.
Yeah.
So the point, like what you were going through from the cash flow perspective or having access to capital is not untypical. And it's not until people realize that when you create your own pool of money that you could draw from, that gives you a lot of independence and a lot of more security going forward. So, you know, if you remember the stuff that we did is we looked at, we call it the financial golf swing, how you were currently using your money. And we just made some minor tweaks. And then sure enough, that put you in a position where you're able to create your own pool of capital. Now, as you know, it doesn't happen overnight. But all of a sudden you look back 5-6 years and you're sitting on a large amount of cash, and you've been able to do a lot of the things that were important to you at the time. You know, we discussed in the pre-call that your oldest daughter is a sophomore, sort of hard to believe, but a sophomore in college. And that was one of your big goals, right? You wanted to make sure that you can get her through college. And, you know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems to me that hasn't been too much of a struggle.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we first met and my kids were tiny, and it just occurred, I mean, when your kids are small, you're just trying to get through the day. Like, if you just get through the day, I've got 4 kids, so it's just a lot. I'm not blaming that on anybody. No one's signed up for 4 kids but me, so, which is fine. In the end, it's a very good decision. But it was like, wow, I got 4 kids. In the time that my wife was pregnant with my first child to the time that she gave birth to our last child, she was pregnant more of those days than she wasn't. So we have them close together. That's the fastest way to tell you they were close together. So I was like, man, at some point, all these kids are going to be in college. And, you know, college costs aren't going down. They're only going up. So I was like, there's just no way to do this. You know, my family wasn't financially able to cover my college bills, which I never expected them to. We grew up on a dairy farm. You know, there's just like not a lot of extra money around. So like if you want to go to college, you know, luckily we qualified for some financial aid because we didn't make much money. It's the best time to be a dairy farmer is when you want to put your kid in school because you qualify for a ton of financial aid. But I still owed money at the end, and that was expected. That was fun. And now that, you know, it's been a couple of years since I was in college, so the cost of that has gone up a ton. So I just kind of was worried about, you know, what is going to happen to my kids, because I see a ton of kids in PT school. It is rare that you get out of PT school with less than $200,000 to $350,000 in student loans, which is crazy. Wow. That's a whole nother topic. It should not be that expensive to become a PT. But I see these kids come in and they have to make decisions that they wouldn't normally make if they weren't under that financial burden. So you'll see a lot of kids that want to do outpatient ortho, but, you know, inpatient hospital setting, like working for a hospital, sometimes they can offer different things that small private practices cannot on the financial end of sides. You know, not huge differences, but small ones. And I had a PTA that left. He was working in our system, and he went to work in a nursing home. And he said, this is not what I want to do, but I just can't turn down the money. I have all these student loans, and I can't get mad at that person for doing that. But they got into a financial situation where they ran out of options, and then they end up doing stuff they don't want to do. And that's the situation that I didn't want to get into. And that just kind of backs up the opportunity stuff. And it's like, you'd be surprised how much opportunity is available. Recently, so we have a billing company, and we were looking to purchase another billing company. And well, you need capital to do that. Even if you did like a small down payment SBA loan, and all of the founders that are in my consulting company are in my billing company. So each of us had to come up with a decent chunk of money. And I remember thinking at the table when we were talking about it, I said, if this was like 5 years ago, you know, when I had met you and I didn't understand how all this worked, like I wouldn't be able to get this opportunity. And I would be at the table, I'd be like, guys, I don't have the money because I hadn't put these systems in place in order to make sure that I have cash available so that if an opportunity comes along, you can take advantage of it. And I think just understanding and what you've taught me about how money works, and, you know, I still have like this nervous tick in the back of my head as my wife writes the check for college. I'm like, you sure we got like enough money to cover that? Yeah. So we just like wrote a check for this semester, and it's still, to me, you know, someone who, you know, came from, you know, small beginnings on a dairy farm, like the fact that I could write checks like that is still crazy to me. But I'm not doing anything special, which is the point that it's not like I stopped, you know, going out to dinner with my wife or taking vacations or cut a ton of stuff out. It's just it's how you use money as a tool. It's like the golf swing, right? Yeah. So I just learned a different way from what you taught me and didn't really change much. I still go to work and try to help people and try to generate money for my family and the families that I feel responsible for that are on my team. But I didn't change anything fundamentally about how we do things financially, except the stuff that you've taught me.
And that's the I think the lesson there is that it is really simple to make these changes. It's not really difficult. The problem is that it's different. And once you realize that you've been trained to use your money in a way that is detrimental to you and your family and your business, and you stop doing or using your money in those ways, all of a sudden, instead of that financial energy flowing away from you, it starts to flow back, and you could make significant changes that are meaningful, that are impactful, but it just requires sort of thinking outside the box, if you will.
It just requires someone that knows more about it than I did. I mean, it's the same thing I do with my consulting stuff. I'm not a genius. I know something that you don't know. It's typically not hard to apply, because if I was able to do it, then anybody can do it. It's just you didn't have knowledge of it at the time. That's the difference. And it's
Right.
not a huge, like, difficult concept to understand. It's just someone else came along, Tim, and said, here's what you think. I still remember, like, you need to record that, like that initial meeting where you kind of teach us how money works. And I just remember walking away from that. I'm like, that's like one of the most important things I've ever learned. And how come I don't know that already? That's what I was thinking. And it's because of all the systems you talk about. Like, a lot of the systems that are in place are working against us. And once you understand how to get them to work for you, then everything changes.
Exactly. So one last thing, Travis, is I meant to circle back to this before, but you said you went to Ithaca College, so you're a Blue Bomber, right?
Yeah.
So did you play sports there?
Yeah, I played football there.
What position?
Oh, well, I played fullback and tight end. I was too short to be a really good tight end, and I was too slow to be a really good running back, but I had a great time.
Yeah, it's knowing what you know today. Would you still play football
Oh, yeah.
in college? Yeah.
I mean, I was lucky. I have some guys that concussion testing was a lot different in the 90s. So that's a lot different, which is great now, because they're just the concussion test. If you got your bell rung and you're on the ground, the trainer would come out and they'd ask you three questions. They'd say, "Where are you? Who's the president? And what school do you go to?" If you could get two out of three of those, they let you play. So
Hmm.
that's kind of what it was there. Um, but I was lucky. I didn't have any terrible knee injuries or anything like that. Would I? So I have two boys, and one tried football and it wasn't for him. Am I happy it wasn't for him? Maybe a little. The different sports, there, you can't avoid concussions. Soccer, there's tons of concussions. He plays lacrosse. He's going to play lacrosse in college next year. He's had a concussion, but nothing too terrible to kind of get around. I think I had a really hard head too. I think that was helpful, because I seem to be doing okay. Although I always tell my wife, I'm like, man, when I forget stuff, she's like, I say, you're lucky you're not feeding me soup out of a spoon at this point. My God, so many concussions that were never treated. You're doing pretty good. So, but I think the lessons that you learn, not just from football, but from anything difficult, where there's an
Right.
opportunity to quit, is something that you should get your kids into. They'll.
Right. And what I always say that the most important day in anybody's life, in anybody who's played football, the most important day of their life is the Wednesday of double sessions, the first week of double sessions. If you can get yourself out of bed to go to that practice because your body is sore from head to toe, you can't walk, you're going to go to practice, you're going to put on sweaty clothes. It's the worst, it's absolute worst feeling in the world. And if you can get yourself out of bed to do that, you can literally face any challenges in the world. I,
Yeah.
I firmly believe that.
Yeah, yeah. One of our core values is perseverance. So whenever we do initial interview, we ask people about, times where they have had examples where they have exemplified this in their life. So we always ask people, like, what are your favorite failures? So, like, what are the things in life that were very difficult for you to do that maybe didn't go your way, but you still kind of overcame that and came through it? And we had one girl that had childhood cancer. And I remember, like, the interview was over. Like, there's nothing I'm going to throw at you that's going to be more difficult than that. So we look
Right.
for people that have a history of like playing a sport because it is hard. Like my daughter plays field hockey, and I remember by the end of the first week, 5 girls. Field hockey is not a huge team. 5 girls quit, and it's like, yep, this is not for me. So if she can get through difficult things, always putting your kids or your teammates at work or whatever through difficult
Right.
things and seeing how they deal with that is a good litmus test.
Well, Travis, it has been it's amazing how fast time has gone by. It's almost an hour. Uh, I really appreciate your time. Any parting shots for our audience?
Yeah, I would just talk to people about the power of coaching. Again, very self-serving. I'm a coach, right? You are a coach, Tim. Whether you think that way or not, you are a coach. Um, if I could do anything over again, I would get coaching sooner. I would ask for help. A lot of people have a hard time asking for help or understanding what that is. But if I mean, I essentially give advice for a living now. Although I say I don't like to give advice, but there is one thing that is universally true. If you want to get somewhere, you need to find someone that is already there and ask to cheat off their paper. I know I said that earlier, but
Yeah.
and usually those people want to help. Like if I'm still waiting for the day where someone, like a lot of people come up to me and say, "You're a pretty impressive dude. You've got like 7 locations. You got all these people, like patients. How do you do that? How does that even work?" I've never had someone come up to me, and I just told my daughter to do this in New York City. She's trying to learn more about marketing and advertising, and she did it, and it worked. I said, "How does no one come up to me and say, 'Hey, I'm going to work for you for free for like 5 hours a day. Can I just follow you around and see what you do and just ask you some questions?'" Like no one would say no to that. So it comes in a lot of different forms.
Sure.
But if you're struggling with something, just find someone who's figured it out and just say, "Hey, can I buy you lunch someday?" And just ask you a couple of questions. I can't tell you how many times I've done that in my life. And every time I do it, I'm like, man, why don't I do this more often? Whether it's in, I did it with my landlord. Like, I want to get into commercial real estate. And I asked my landlord, which seems kind of counterintuitive, like, why would this guy want me to go buy a building? Because then now I'm not a renter with him anymore. The guy couldn't help me out any more than he did. Unbelievable. He sent me listings. He's like, yeah, I'll lose you as a renter, I guess, but the relationship that I build with you by trying to help you out is going to pay off like 10 times down the road. Who do you think I'm going to refer people to that if I did get into commercial real estate, I'm not going to have a ton of properties, right? If I didn't have a property that fit, then I would say, hey, you should go talk to Jeff. That guy's the man. He's got tons of property. You should help him out. And I think the faster you realize that, the better you'll sleep at night.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Travis Robbins, Robbins Rehabilitation West.